"I promise to be gentle," whispered the 44-year-old Arab millionaire on their wedding night. She, only 23 years old and a single mother, never imagined those words would turn that night into a dream come true. What happened when she surrendered for the first time to a man 21 years older? Tell us, where are you watching from? Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to discover how one promise changed everything. The June sun reflected on the turquoise waters of the Atlantic, projecting ephemeral diamonds on the undulating surface. Standing on the balcony of her hotel room in the Hamptons, Claire Reynolds contemplated the horizon with a gaze that searched well beyond the blue immensity. At 32, she carried on her shoulders the weight of a meticulously organized life, as predictable as the tides, yet empty of a certain form of fulfillment she dared not name. We're all connected by invisible threads that we ignore until the day someone pulls on them and disrupts our entire balance, she murmured, letting the words fly toward the sea like a silent prayer. Her fingers nervously tapped on the wrought iron railing. In less than 2 hours, she would have to smile for the cameras, answer journalists' questions with the confidence expected of her. The star curator, whose traveling exhibition on contemporary Mediterranean art had just conquered New York and was about to do the same on the East Coast. What nobody knew was that Claire had learned 3 days earlier that her application to direct the prestigious Museum of Modern Art in New York had been rejected. Too conventional in her approaches, the letter said, lacking disruptive innovation, words that had pierced her like poisoned arrows, calling into question 15 years of hard work. Her phone vibrated. A message from Mark, her assistant. "The car will be here in 20 minutes. The press is waiting. The Secretary of Culture just arrived." Claire closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The sea air filled her lungs with a salty freshness that contrasted with the anxiety tightening her chest. When she reopened her eyes, her gaze was drawn to a figure on the beach below. A man stood motionless facing the sea, barefoot in the sand, his black hair dancing gently in the Atlantic breeze. Even at that distance, something in his posture, a mix of vulnerability and quiet strength, captured her attention. The man suddenly turned, as if he had felt her gaze upon him. For a brief moment, their eyes met across the distance. Claire felt an inexplicable shiver run through her body, as if one of the invisible threads she spoke of had been pulled, connecting her to this stranger through a bond as mysterious as it was improbable. She instinctively drew back, disturbed by this unexpected sensation. At that precise moment, she could not know that this man, Karim Al-Fayez, an Emirati photographer with a chaotic background, would soon become the catalyst that would shatter all the certainties of her carefully orchestrated life. The phone's ringtone broke the spell. Claire tore her gaze away from the stranger and went back into her room. She put on her navy blue dress, her lucky color for important days, and observed her reflection in the mirror. The image gave her back that of an accomplished, self-confident woman, but her eyes, those windows to the soul that even the most perfected social mask could not conceal, told another story, that of a woman who was beginning to wonder if the path she had traced was truly the one that led to her happiness. The opening was in full swing in the vast gallery of the Hamptons Museum of Contemporary Art. Guests, champagne flutes in hand, strolled among the exhibited works, exchanging polite comments and calculated observations. Claire, in her element, navigated from one group to another with an ease born of habit, dispensing anecdotes about the artists and explanations about the artistic movements represented. This piece explores the duality between tradition and modernity in Sicilian culture, she explained to a small group of wealthy collectors, pointing to a complex installation mixing sepia photographs and digital projections. That's when she saw him, the man from the beach. He stood slightly apart, observing not the works but the reactions of the visitors. His dark suit, elegant but visibly not high-end, contrasted with the haute couture outfits that populated the room. A professional camera hung negligently from his neck. Their gazes met again, and this time he smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes that seemed to carry the weight of untold stories. "You seem to know your subject," he said as he approached, his Arabic accent subtly coloring his impeccable English. Claire imperceptibly stiffened. "It's my job to know it." "Oh, of course," he replied with a small nod. "I'm Karim Al-Fayez. I'm documenting the exhibition for contemporary art." "The international magazine?" Claire was surprised. She hadn't been informed of their presence. "Exactly. We're preparing a special issue on the circulation of Mediterranean works. He paused, observing her with disconcerting intensity. Your exhibition is interesting, very academic, very safe. The word had the effect of a slap. Safe. Exactly what the rejection letter had insinuated. I beg your pardon? Her voice was calm, but her knuckles whitened around the stem of her champagne glass. It's not a criticism, he quickly added, simply an observation. In a world of gratuitous provocations, there's something refreshing about mastery, but I wonder— Yes, she challenged him, unable to conceal the irritation in her voice. I wonder what your exhibition would be like if you freed yourself from your own rules. Mark suddenly appeared at her side, like a guardian sensing danger. Claire, the secretary wishes to introduce you to some people. She nodded, grateful for the interruption. Mr. Alfayez, if you'd like an official interview, my assistant can arrange it. Karim bowed slightly, a gesture imbued with subtle irony. It would be a pleasure, but I always prefer unscripted conversations. They reveal more truths. As she walked away, Claire felt his gaze follow her. This man had, in just a few sentences, put his finger on the crack that had been widening in her for months. Safety, the comfort of mastery, the absence of risk. Who was that man? Murmured Mark. No one important, she replied, but the slight trembling of her hand betrayed her. I don't understand why you insist on including him in our media coverage, exclaimed Claire, nervously pacing the confined space of her temporary office. This Al-Fayez isn't even a recognized art critic. Mark, seated across from her, consulted his iPad with a calmness that contrasted with his superior's agitation. He received the Carmona Award last year for his work on marginalized artists in Dubai. His article could reach a different audience, younger, more what? She cut him off sharply. More in tune with new artistic trends, Mark completed carefully. Claire stopped at the window. 3 days had passed since the opening, and she couldn't shake off this troubling encounter. Karim Al-Fayez's words still resonated in her mind like a haunting melody. Very well, she finally conceded. Give him an hour tomorrow. No more. The next day in the museum gardens, Karim arrived 10 minutes late and without a notebook, just his camera. No recorder. No prepared questions, wondered Claire, seated on a bench in the shade of a century-old olive tree. Karim sat beside her, deliberately leaving a space between them. I prefer conversations to interviews. Prepared questions lead to prepared answers. And what exactly do you want to know? Why art? His question, simple, direct, took her by surprise. Claire opened her mouth to deliver her usual response, the one she served in every interview. The story of her painter grandfather, her studies at Columbia, her passion for cultural democratization. But something in Karim's attentive gaze prevented her. Art, she began, searching for words with unusual hesitation. Art was my refuge. As a child, I was pathologically shy. Painting spoke to me when people terrified me. They didn't judge my silence. A flash of surprise crossed Karim's gaze, as if he hadn't expected such vulnerability. And now? He asked gently. Now I speak for them. I am their voice. Or at least— She broke off, a crack appearing in her professional facade. Or at least that's what I thought I was doing. What do you mean? Claire contemplated her hands, perfectly manicured, a symbol of the control she exercised over every aspect of her life. I recently applied to direct a major museum. My application was rejected. Apparently I lack audacity. Ironic, isn't it? I, who believed I was defending artistic freedom, I find myself labeled as conventional. She looked up, surprised by her own confession. This information wasn't public. Why was she sharing it with this stranger? Karim remained silent for a moment, as if weighing his response. Perhaps the problem isn't your vision of art, but your vision of yourself. I beg your pardon. You talk about being the voice of the works, but art doesn't need an interpreter. It needs someone who creates the space where it can resonate directly with people. He leaned slightly toward her. When was the last time you took a risk, Claire? A real risk, not calculated, not measured. Something that scared you. The question hit her like an unexpected wave. She opened her mouth, then closed it. No answer came. That's what I thought, murmured Karim, his gaze softening. He stood, and without warning, took a photo of her. The click of the camera broke the silence like a small detonation. "What are you doing?" she protested. "I'm capturing the exact moment when someone begins to see themselves differently. It's rare and precious." He checked the photo on his camera screen and smiled. "Thank you for this conversation, Ms. Reynolds. It was much more revealing than I had hoped." As he walked away, Claire remained seated, troubled by the strange sensation that this encounter had just created a first, tiny crack in the armor she had forged over the years. The following week passed in a whirlwind of activities. The exhibition was encountering considerable success, attracting record attendance for the season. Claire should have rejoiced, savoring this professional victory that confirmed her expertise. Yet each compliment on the perfect harmony or elegant presentation of the works now resonated as a subtle reminder of what she was beginning to perceive as her own limitations. One evening, as she worked late in her temporary office, Mark gently knocked on the half-open door. "A courier just dropped this off for you," he said, handing her a large craft envelope. Claire opened it with curiosity. It contained a magazine, contemporary art, and a handwritten note. Page 32. "Sometimes seeing through another's eyes allows us to rediscover ourselves. K.A." Intrigued, she quickly turned the pages to Karim Al-Fayez's article. Instead of the critical account she dreaded, she discovered a photo essay, a series of shots taken during the opening, but not of the exhibited works, of the visitors. Close-ups of their expressions, capturing surprise, wonder, sometimes incomprehension in the face of artistic creations. And at the center of the double page, a photo of herself taken in the gardens during their conversation. The image showed her in profile, her gaze lost in the distance, an expression of vulnerable doubt on her usually composed face. The caption simply read, "Claire Reynolds, the invisible orchestrator who begins to question her own score." The text accompanying the photos was concise, almost poetic. The Contemporary Mediterranean exhibition is not remarkable for its audacity, it doesn't pretend to that, but for its ability to create a space where art and spectator can dialogue without intermediary. Claire Reynolds, its curator, possesses this rare gift of stepping aside to let the work speak. Yet one senses in this guardian of culture an inner battle between the mastery that has made her reputation and a deeper, still unexplored aspiration. True art often arises from such conflicts. Claire closed the magazine troubled. Karim hadn't written a critique but a portrait, hers. A portrait that saw beyond her professional facade, that intuited her doubts, her questionings. How had this man she barely knew been able to read her with such acuity? At the bottom of the envelope, she discovered a second paper, an invitation to a photography exhibition entitled Fragments, being held in a small independent gallery in Los Angeles. Karim Al-Fayez's exhibition. "Should I book you a flight to Los Angeles?" asked Mark, who, standing in the doorway, had observed her in silence. Claire hesitated. Leaving now would be irresponsible. The Hamptons exhibition still required her presence for at least 10 more days. Moreover, going to this man's exhibition would be like admitting he had awakened something in her, that she was curious to know more. "No," she replied firmly. "I have too many responsibilities here." Mark nodded, but a slight smile hovered on his lips. Of course, very reasonable. When night came, lying in her hotel bed, Claire couldn't find sleep. The image that Karim had captured of her haunted her, that expression of doubt, so far from the assurance she strived to project. Was that really how he saw her? More troubling still, was that really how she was? Her phone vibrated on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number. Real changes always begin with a step that seems senseless in the eyes of others. "Los Angeles is beautiful this season. Kate." Claire stared at the message, torn between irritation and a strange excitement she hadn't felt in a long time. How had he obtained her personal number? The audacity of this man was as annoying as it was intriguing. She put down the phone without responding, but sleep continued to elude her. In the early morning, after a night of insomnia and inner debates, she called Mark. "Book me a flight to Los Angeles in 10 days, she said in a voice that attempted to mask her own surprise at this decision. "And keep this confidential, please." Hanging up, Claire felt an unusual sensation, a mix of apprehension and excitement that reminded her of her first days in the art world, before career strategies and political considerations took precedence over pure passion. For the first time in a long time, she had made a choice that didn't fit into a pre-established plan, a step into the unknown. Los Angeles vibrated under the June sun. Seated at the terrace of a cafe in the Arts District, Claire consulted the address of the gallery where Karim's exhibition was being held. After postponing her visit until the last day of her stay, she could no longer back out. She had spent 3 days exploring the city, pretending to want to visit local cultural institutions to justify this impromptu trip to her team in New York. In reality, she had mostly walked aimlessly, rediscovering the simple pleasure of getting lost in unknown streets, of observing daily life without analyzing it through a professional prism. "You finally decided to come." The voice, with its characteristic Arabic accent, made her start. Karim stood before her, simply dressed in a white t-shirt and worn jeans, a casual outfit that contrasted with the suit he wore in the Hamptons. "How did you know I was here?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. He smiled, pulling out a chair to sit across from her. "I didn't know. This is my usual cafe. Chance sometimes arranges meetings better than all plans." Claire didn't believe it for a second. "Chance, really? Perhaps a bit of intuition," he admitted with a shrug. "I suspected that if you came to Los Angeles, you'd choose this neighborhood. It resembles you, elegant, historic, but with surprises hidden in its corners." She felt herself blush despite herself, disturbed by this perception he seemed to have of her. "Your article, it was different from what I expected." "Disappointed?" "Intrigued," she corrected. "You wrote about me, not about the exhibition." Karim ordered a coffee from a passing waiter, then returned his attention to her. "The exhibition speaks for itself. You are more interesting, this tension between who you are and who you think you should be." Claire stiffened. "You don't know me." "No," he admitted easily, "but I observe you. It's my job to see what others don't see or choose to ignore." A silence settled between them, charged with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Why did you invite me to your exhibition?" she finally asked. Karim considered her for a moment, as if weighing his answer. "Because I have the feeling that you're at a crossroads, and that what I show might resonate with this particular moment in your life." He consulted his watch. "By the way, we should go now. The gallery closes early today." Without waiting for her response, he stood up and left a few coins on the table. Claire hesitated, then followed him through the maze of paved streets. They walked side by side, their shoulders occasionally brushing in the narrow passages. "Were you born in New York?" he asked. "No, in a small village near Boston. My father was a schoolteacher, my mother a librarian." "How does one go from a village to directing international exhibitions?" Claire smiled despite herself. "By working very hard, by leaving nothing to chance." Karim glanced at her out of the corner of his eye. "And sacrificing what?" The question disconcerted her with its frankness. "I beg your pardon?" "One always sacrifices something. To succeed as you have. I just wonder what it was in your case." Claire almost stopped dead. This man had a destabilizing way of asking questions that touched sensitive chords. "Are you always this direct with strangers?" "We're not really strangers anymore, are we? You've crossed a country to see my exhibition." Before she could respond, they arrived in front of a small gallery nestled between an old bookstore and an artisan's workshop. The place was modest but charming, with its exposed stone walls and high windows that let in a soft light. "Welcome to Fragments," said Karim, holding the door for her, "the place where broken pieces reveal their own beauty." The exhibition was radically different from what Claire had imagined. Instead of the large artistic prints she expected to see, the gallery walls were covered with photographs of various sizes, some no larger than a postcard, others spreading across entire sections of wall. They formed a fascinating visual mosaic, each image seeming both independent and part of a larger whole. "They're all fragments of the same story," explained Karim, carefully observing her reactions. "A story I've been tracking for 5 years." Claire approached the images. They showed ordinary people in moments of transition. An old man leaving his house for the last time, the moving box in his arms, a young woman in front of a mirror, cutting her hair with determination, a couple holding hands facing a stormy sea. "I photograph pivotal moments," continued Karim softly, as if he feared breaking Claire's concentration. "Those instants when a person stands exactly between what they were and what they will become." She stopped in front of a particularly striking photo, an elderly flamenco dancer seated on a chair, looking at his worn dance shoes. His face bore an expression impossible to describe, a mixture of pride, resignation, and serene acceptance. "Manuel Rodriguez," said Karim, approaching. "For 40 years, he was one of the greatest dancers in Seville. This photo was taken the day he decided never to dance professionally again." "It's of unfathomable sadness," murmured Claire. "You think so?" Karim tilted his head, considering the photo. "I see dignity in it. He chose to stop at his peak, rather than wait for his body to betray him. It's an act of courage, not defeat." They continued their journey, Karim sometimes explaining the story behind certain images, maintaining silence for others. Claire felt increasingly troubled by the resonance of these photographs with her own situation. These lives captured at a precise moment when everything could change. At the back of the gallery, in an alcove slightly isolated from the rest of the exhibition, a large black and white photo drew attention. It showed a woman in her 60s, elegant and distinguished, standing straight before a blank canvas in a studio flooded with light. "Isabella Vidal," Karim introduced. "For 30 years she was the director of the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts in Madrid. At 60, she left everything to become simply a painter again." Claire felt her throat tighten. "Did she succeed? As an artist, I mean?" "It depends on what you mean by succeed." Karim crossed his arms, contemplating the photo. "She'll never be as well known as a painter as she was as a director. But when I asked her the question, she answered that she finally felt alive. That directing others' art had distanced her from her own voice." The parallel was too obvious to ignore. Claire felt a strange emotion rise within her, a mixture of discomfort and profound recognition. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked, her voice barely louder than a whisper. "To suggest that I should abandon my career and reconvert?" Karim shook his head, his gaze serious. "No. To show you that we all have moments when we must choose between continuing on a comfortable path that no longer nourishes us, or taking a risk toward something unknown." He moved closer to her, reducing the space between them. "I invited you because I recognize that expression in your eyes, the same one I've seen in all these people, that acute awareness that a chapter is ending, and the apprehension before the blank page." Claire looked away, suddenly vulnerable. "You're wrong. My career is in full ascension. Maybe, but something in you is at a standstill. I saw it from our very first meeting." A silence settled between them, thick as the twilight that was beginning to envelop the city outside. "And you?" Claire finally asked. "What was your pivotal moment?" Karim's face darkened imperceptibly. "It's a long story, one I don't often tell. I think you owe me at least that much, after making me cross a country on a whim." He smiled, conceding the point. "All right, but not here." He consulted his watch. "The gallery is closing. Would you accept dining with me? I know a place that serves the best pasta in Los Angeles." Claire knew she should refuse. Maintain a professional distance. Return to her hotel and prepare for her return to New York the next day. But something in this exhibition, in the stories of these lives captured at their turning point, had shaken her certainties. "All right," she said, "but I want the whole story, not just carefully selected fragments." Karim nodded, a new light in his gaze. "Deal." The restaurant was nestled in a narrow alley in the Little Tokyo district, a short walk from the river, simple and authentic, with its checkered tablecloths and walls adorned with old photos of fishermen. It was filled with locals rather than tourists, one of those places only residents know. Seated at a table in a corner, Claire and Karim shared a feast of seafood and a bottle of Californian white wine with a mineral, saline taste. The conversation had begun with banalities, but a surprising complicity had quickly established itself between them. "So," said Claire, setting down her glass, "your story. You promised it to me." Karim leaned back in his chair, his gaze becoming distant. "I was a photojournalist. For nearly 15 years I covered conflict zones, Iraq, Syria, Ukraine, Sudan. I was good at capturing horror in a sellable way." He pronounced this last word with evident bitterness. "What happened?" "Aleppo." The name floated between them like a ghost. "I was there to document the siege. One day I photographed a group of children playing in the ruins. A moment later, an airstrike." His voice broke slightly. "I continued taking photos, automatically, like a robot. The rescuers arriving, the parents screaming, the bodies being pulled from the rubble. Claire felt a shiver run through her despite the warmth of the evening. Those photos made headlines worldwide. I received a major photojournalism award for that series, and that's when I broke down. He took a long sip of wine. During the awards ceremony, all I could hear were the cries of those parents. I wondered what kind of person I had become to transform their suffering into objects of professional admiration. Did you stop completely? Not immediately. I tried to continue, but something had broken in me. I was taking the same photos as before, but they were empty, as if my eye no longer believed in what it saw. He sketched a joyless smile. Ironically, it was at that moment that I began to truly see the people around me. Not as subjects for reporting, but as complete human beings with their own stories. And that's how Fragments was born. Not right away. First I spent a year doing nothing, drinking too much, losing myself. Then one day I crossed paths with an old man emptying his house, the one you saw in the photo. I started talking to him. He told me that after 50 years in that house, following his wife's death, he was going to live with his daughter in San Diego. He was both terrified and strangely liberated. I asked to take his photo and something reconnected in me. Claire observed him attentively, touched by this unfiltered confession. You found a new way to tell the truth. Perhaps. Or perhaps I just found a different truth to tell. He looked her straight in the eyes. And you, Claire Reynolds, what truth are you avoiding telling, even to yourself? The question was direct, almost brutal in its simplicity. Claire felt her usual defenses rise, then surprisingly collapse. I no longer know why I do what I do, she admitted, the words coming out before she could hold them back. In the beginning, it was for love of art, from the conviction that works could change people, broaden their vision of the world. But somewhere along the way, she broke off, searching for the right words. Somewhere along the way, I started playing a game whose rules I didn't write, worrying about my status, my reputation, my place in art history. And now? Now I feel like that dancer with his worn-out shoes. Except he knew when to stop. I keep dancing, even though the music no longer touches me. A waiter passed by, placing 2 plates of panna cotta in front of them. They remained silent for a moment, absorbing the shared confessions. What would make you feel the music again? Karim finally asked. Claire contemplated the question, surprised to realize she had never really thought about it. I don't know, maybe creating an exhibition that would be truly personal, that wouldn't seek to impress the milieu or follow trends, something that would speak directly to people's hearts, not their intellect. Why not do it then? She gave a disillusioned little laugh. It's not that simple. There are expectations, commitments, excuses, he gently completed. Their gazes met, and for the first time Claire didn't look away. She felt something transform within her, a resistance giving way, a possibility opening up. Perhaps, she admitted, perhaps they are excuses. The evening stretched on, their conversation becoming more personal, deeper. They left the restaurant and walked along the riverfront, barefoot on the still warm grass. The river murmured softly, and above them the stars seemed to observe this improbable meeting between 2 souls in transition. When Karim accompanied her back to her hotel, there was a moment of electric tension between them, the evident attraction that had developed over the hours. I leave tomorrow, said Claire, stopping in front of the hotel entrance. I know. I'm not looking for... She broke off, uncertain of what she really wanted to say. Karim smiled, understanding her unexpressed hesitations. I'm not asking anything of you, Claire. This evening was a gift in itself. He leaned in slowly and placed a light kiss on her cheek, lingering just long enough for her to smell his scent, a mixture of river water and spices. Good night, he murmured, and safe journey back. As he walked away into the Los Angeles night, Claire remained motionless, unconsciously touching her cheek. For the first time in years, she felt fully present in the moment, each sensation amplified, each emotion pulsing with a new intensity. She went up to her room, knowing that sleep would evade her that night. Too many thoughts were swirling in her mind, too many possibilities suddenly opening before her. In the dim light of her hotel room, facing the Pacific that sparkled under the moon, Claire Reynolds felt that her life, carefully planned until now, had just taken an unexpected turn. The return to New York was more difficult than Claire had anticipated. The hushed corridors of the foundation, where she worked, suddenly seemed cramped. Her colleagues' conversations sounded hollow to her ears. Every meeting, every minor decision regarding the next exhibition, everything now seemed to her of an almost unbearable futility. 2 weeks had passed since Los Angeles, and Karim had given no sign of life. Claire oscillated between relief and disappointment, sometimes reproaching herself for having hoped for, what exactly? A continuation of this strange encounter that had stirred so many things within her. "You seem elsewhere, Claire," noted Paul Morrison, the Foundation's director as they discussed artists to include in the autumn retrospective. "Is something troubling you?" She straightened in her armchair, forcing herself to refocus. "No, not at all. I was simply reflecting on the coherence of the selection." Paul, a man in his 60s, whose brilliant career compensated for his lack of human warmth, considered her with undisguised skepticism. "I read that article in Contemporary Art. Interesting perspective on your work." Claire felt her heart skip a beat. "You read the international press now?" "I read everything concerning my key collaborators." His tone was neutral, but his piercing gaze wasn't. "This photographer, Al-Fayez, he seems to have a rather personal vision of your curatorial approach." It was his interpretation, nothing more. Paul slowly nodded. "Of course. Nevertheless, I hope you haven't forgotten our institution's guiding principle. The Hamptons exhibition was a success precisely because it corresponded to our standards of excellence and predictability." The word resonated like an echo of what Karim had criticized. Claire felt a wave of rebellion rise within her, but suppressed it. This was neither the time nor the place for a confrontation. "Obviously," she merely replied. The meeting continued, but the incident had left a bitter taste in her mouth. Leaving Paul's office, she overheard whispers between 2 assistants, who fell silent at her approach. A diffuse unease invaded her, that impression that everyone knew something she didn't. In her office, Mark was waiting with a folder. "The first proposals for the layout of works in the retrospective," he explained. Claire distractedly browsed the plans. "It's too conventional," she let slip. "It looks exactly like last year's configuration." Mark looked at her with surprise. "It's the format the director prefers, the one that always works. And what if, for once, we tried something different?" She stood, suddenly animated by a new energy. "What if we mixed periods, creating unexpected dialogues between works? Or if we organized the space around emotions rather than chronology?" Her assistant observed her, as if she had just suggested hanging the paintings upside down. I suppose that's possible, but the director—" "I'll handle Paul," she cut him off. "Prepare a new proposal for me by tomorrow, something bold." Once Mark had left, Claire let herself fall back into her armchair, both elated and frightened by her own audacity. What was she doing? Risking a carefully constructed career for what exactly? Her phone vibrated. A message from Paul. "My office, 5 p.m. Urgent." Apprehension knotted her stomach. Had he already gotten wind of her intentions to shake up the exhibition format? Or was it something else? At 5 p.m. sharp, she knocked on the director's door, striving to display an assurance she didn't feel. Paul wasn't alone. Facing him sat Ellen White, the president of the Foundation's board of directors, a formidable woman whose influence in the art world was legendary. "Ah, Claire, come in," said Paul, his falsely cordial tone sounding like a warning. "Mrs. White wished to discuss with you a delicate matter." Claire sat down, back straight, all her senses on alert. Ellen took an iPad out of her bag and slid it toward Claire. On the screen was an article from the Los Angeles Arts magazine, titled "Dangerous Liaisons in the Art World," and illustrated by a photo taken without her knowledge. She and Karim, walking barefoot along the river, visibly intimate in their conversation. "This seems to be more than just a professional interview," commented Ellen, her voice as sharp as glass. "Karim Al-Fayez has a reputation in certain circles. A reputation as a disruptor." Claire quickly scanned the article, her heart beating furiously. The text insinuated that she and Karim maintained a relationship that went beyond the professional framework, and suggested that this influence might explain certain changes in artistic orientation she would have recently mentioned to colleagues. "This is ridiculous," she protested. "I met him in a strictly professional context, on a riverfront at night. interrogated Paul, his tone now openly accusatory. We had dinner and discussed art, nothing more. Her voice was firm despite the turmoil invading her. And I haven't mentioned any change in orientation to anyone. Ellen and Paul exchanged a telling look. Claire, resumed Ellen, her tone softened, but all the more threatening for it. You are one of the public faces of our institution. Your conduct, professional and personal, reflects on all of us. My conduct has always been impeccable, Claire replied, feeling anger replace her initial fear. Until recently, yes, intervened Paul. But these past weeks, your behavior has changed. Unexplained absences, questioning of established methods. And now these photos, completed Ellen. We must protect the Foundation's reputation. The blow fell, implacable. We think it would be preferable for you to take a leave. A few months, perhaps. Time for this situation to settle down. Claire stared at them, incredulous. You're suspending me? For having dinner with a colleague? For having shown a lack of judgment that could compromise your professional objectivity, corrected Paul. Mark will take charge of your ongoing projects. Mark, repeated Claire, dumbfounded. A terrible thought crossed her mind. Was it he who told you about my ideas for the retrospective? The embarrassed silence that followed was confirmation enough. The betrayal of her assistant, in whom she had full confidence, was like a stab in the back. I see, she said, her voice surprisingly calm despite the storm raging within her. And if I refuse this, leave? It would be regrettable, responded Ellen, her gaze hard as steel. For your future career. The message was clear. Claire rose slowly, head high despite the humiliation burning within her. In that case, I'll spare you this trouble. I accept your suggestion, and I'll present my resignation tomorrow morning. Without waiting for their reaction, she left the office, back straight, step assured. It was only once in the elevator alone that the tears began to flow. In 15 years of impeccable career, everything had collapsed in less than 15 minutes. Claire's apartment, located in Soho, had always been her haven, an elegant, orderly space that reflected her meticulous personality. But today, 3 weeks after her explosive resignation from the Foundation, these same walls seemed to suffocate her. Seated in her living room, bathed in July's golden light, she contemplated the emptiness of her once overloaded calendar. The phone had stopped ringing after the first frantic days, when colleagues and friends had called to understand what had happened. Now reigned an ear-splitting silence. The news of her departure had circulated around New York's small art world with frightening rapidity. Rumors were rife, some evoking burnout, others a scandalous liaison, still others a major disagreement over artistic direction. No one seemed to care about the truth. Claire had first tried to contact Karim, driven by a mixture of anger and confusion. How could the article have appeared with that photo? Did he have anything to do with it? But her messages had remained unanswered, confirming her fear that he had perhaps used her for some personal revenge against the system she represented. Her phone vibrated on the coffee table, a message from her mother, worried about her prolonged silence. Claire ignored it. How to explain to her parents, proud of her professional success, that she had just thrown everything out the window for what exactly? Doubt gnawed at her. Had she overreacted? Should she simply have accepted the forced leave, kept a low profile, then returned when the scandal had died down? That's what reason dictated to her. But something in her, that part awakened in Los Angeles, had refused to bow to this humiliation, this injustice. The doorbell chimed, pulling her from her dark thoughts. She wasn't expecting anyone and hesitated to open. Perhaps a tenacious journalist seeking a scoop on her disgrace. Reluctantly, she headed to the intercom. Yes? It's Sophia Reynolds. Claire frowned. Sophia, her cousin whom she hadn't seen in almost 2 years. What was she doing in New York? She opened the door to a smiling young woman who immediately embraced her. I was passing through New York for the weekend and heard the news, explained Sophia, entering. Why didn't you call me? Claire shrugged, uncomfortable. I didn't want to. I don't know. It's complicated. Sophia set down her bag and observed the living room. You've lived here how long? 5 years, and it's the first time I've come? It's a bit my fault too, I guess. They settled on the couch, and Sophia pulled out a bottle of wine and 2 glasses from her bag. I thought you might need this. They drank in silence for a moment. Then Sophia gently asked, Do you want to talk about it? The simple kindness of this question broke something in Claire. Words began to come out, first hesitant, then in a torrent. Her trip to Los Angeles, her encounter with Karim, the exhibition that had moved her, the doubts that had been growing in her for months, and finally, the humiliation of that meeting that had tipped everything over. Sophia listened without interrupting, her eyes reflecting an understanding that soothed Claire more than she would have thought possible. "You know what's strangest?" concluded Claire. "I should be devastated. I've lost the job for which I sacrificed my entire personal life. My reputation is in tatters, and yet I feel almost relieved, as if I'd freed myself from a role that was no longer mine." Sophia smiled. "That doesn't seem strange to me at all. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself." "Very philosophical," joked Claire. "Since when are you so wise?" "Since I got divorced last year," replied Sophia with a little laugh. "You don't know because you were too busy organizing international exhibitions to answer my messages." Guilt traversed Claire. It was true. She had neglected her family, her friendships, everything that didn't directly contribute to her career. "I'm sorry, Sophia. I've been absent. You were on your path, but perhaps that path has just taken an unexpected turn." Sophia placed her hand on Claire's. "You know, after my divorce, I spent months feeling like a failure. Then one day I realized it wasn't a failure, but a necessary transition. I needed to lose that life to build a new one." Claire contemplated her cousin with a fresh gaze. Sophia, 6 years younger, had always seemed to live in her shadow. The brilliant Claire who succeeded in everything she undertook, facing the discreet Sophia who had made more conventional choices. But now she saw a quiet strength in her cousin, a wisdom born of experience that she herself sorely lacked. "What am I going to do now?" murmured Claire, expressing aloud the question that haunted her day and night. "Maybe that's not the right question," suggested Sophia. "Maybe the real question is, what do you truly want to do? Not what you should do to save your career or what others expect of you, but what would make your heart beat again." These words resonated deeply with Claire. What would make her heart beat again? How long had it been since she had felt that pure passion for art that had initially pushed her in this direction? "I don't know," she admitted. "I no longer know." "Then that's your next project," declared Sophia, refilling their glasses. "Not finding a new position, not saving your reputation, but rediscovering what makes you vibrate." They spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, for the first time in years. Sophia told her about her divorce, her move to Boston, her new job in publishing. Claire realized with astonishment how much her cousin's life had changed without her knowing anything about it. When Sophia left the next morning, Claire felt different. The void was still there, but it was no longer a terrifying abyss, rather an open space, full of possibilities still unexplored. She settled at her desk, and for the first time since her resignation, opened her computer. Instead of checking her professional emails or cultural news sites, she opened a blank document and began to write. Not a career plan, not a return strategy, simply her thoughts, her emotions, her questions. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself not to know, to explore without a predefined destination. When evening came, she left her apartment and walked aimlessly through the streets of New York, rediscovering her city with new eyes, no longer as a professional networking ground, but as a living space vibrant with stories and possibilities. On the Brooklyn Bridge, she stopped and contemplated the East River reflecting the city lights. A strange thought crossed her mind. What if this fall wasn't an end but a beginning? Autumn had draped Central Park in golden and reddish hues. Seated on a bench facing the lake, Claire observed a group of children enthusiastically pushing small sailboats on the water. 3 months had passed since her resignation, and her life had taken a turn she would never have imagined. After weeks of introspection, she had begun to do what she had missed for years. Simply visiting exhibitions, not as a professional analyzing curatorial choices, but as a spectator open to the emotions that art could evoke. She had rediscovered museums she knew by heart, lingering before works she wouldn't have noticed before. One day, in a small gallery in Chelsea, she had engaged in spontaneous conversation with a visitor, sharing her impressions without the usual reserve. This discussion had led her to an informal group of art lovers who met each week to explore exhibitions together, far from official circuits and fashionable openings. In this group, Where no one knew her professional past, Claire had found a space of unprecedented freedom. Little by little, she was rediscovering what had attracted her to art in the first place, that ability to touch the soul, to question certainties, to open new horizons. Financially, her situation remained precarious. Her savings would last a few more months, but the professional future remained uncertain. Several institutions had discreetly approached her, offering positions less prestigious than the one she had left, barely veiled attempts to capitalize on her disgrace while benefiting from her expertise. She had refused, not out of pride, but because none of these proposals resonated with what she was discovering about herself. A little boy ran toward her, chasing his boat that had strayed near her bench. As she helped him retrieve the toy, Claire smiled. These simple moments of human connection now seemed more precious to her than the sophisticated conversations at art soirees she once frequented. "I knew I'd find you in a museum or a park." The voice froze her in place. That intonation, that slight Arabic accent. She turned slowly. Karim stood there, camera slung over his shoulder, observing her with an indecipherable expression, a mixture of caution and hope. Claire felt a whirlwind of contradictory emotions invade her, anger, confusion, and despite herself, a spark of joy at seeing him again. "How dare you come back?" Her voice was low, contained, but charged with an intensity that didn't escape him. "I heard what happened," he replied simply. "I came to explain myself." "Explain yourself," she repeated, incredulity vying with indignation. "You disappear for months after an article with a photo taken without my knowledge destroyed my career, and you come to explain yourself." Karim glanced at the children playing nearby, then returned his attention to her. "Not here, please. Give me an hour. If after that you want me to disappear from your life forever, I'll respect your choice." Claire hesitated. Part of her simply wanted to chase him away, refused to hear his excuses. But another part, the one that in recent months had learned to explore the unknown rather than protect herself from it, was curious. 1 hour, she finally conceded, not a minute more. They walked in silence to a nearby cafe, settling at a table apart. Karim ordered 2 coffees, then took a folder out of his bag and placed it between them. "I never authorized the publication of that photo," he began without preamble. "I didn't even write the article that accompanied it." Claire looked at him, skeptical. "Then how?" "Alvaro Mendez, a photographer I worked with years ago. He was in Los Angeles that night, saw us on the riverfront and took these photos." Karim opened the folder, revealing a series of documents. "Here's my official complaint against him and the magazine, dated the day the article appeared. And here's their response, public apologies that will appear in the next issue." Claire scanned the documents, stunned. He was telling the truth. The magazine's letter acknowledged that the article had been published without Karim's authorization, based on photos obtained in an unethical manner. "Why didn't you contact me?" she asked, her voice less hard, but still wary. Karim ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that betrayed his discomfort. "I tried, several times. But what? I was on assignment in Morocco when the article came out, in remote areas without reliable connection. When I was finally able to reach you, you had already resigned. I then thought that my presence would only make things worse, that you would blame me, rightfully, for what had happened." His eyes met hers, sincere and troubled. "And then there was the accident." It was then that Claire noticed the slight scar on his right temple, almost invisible under his hairline. "An accident in the Atlas Mountains," he explained briefly. "Nothing serious, but I spent a few weeks in the hospital. By the time I recovered and was able to travel, almost 3 months had passed." Silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken words and missed opportunities. "I understand that you no longer trust me," Karim gently resumed. "But I wanted you to know the truth, and also—" he hesitated. "Also, I wanted to know how you were doing. Really." The question, simple and direct, disarmed Claire. How was she doing, really? She searched for words, surprised to find that she wanted to answer him honestly. "I'm rediscovering who I am, I think. Who I am when I don't define myself by my title or position. It's destabilizing, but also strangely liberating." A smile appeared on Karim's face. Not the charming smile she had known in Los Angeles, but something softer, almost vulnerable. "The exhibition on pivotal moments continues to travel," he suddenly announced. "It will be at the Whitney next month." Claire looked up, surprised. "Here in New York?" He nodded. "I've added some new photos since Los Angeles. People I've met, stories I've discovered." A pause. "You could come see." "If you want." The invitation floated between them, charged with a significance that went beyond the simple visit to an exhibition. "I don't know, Karim," she replied honestly. "I don't know if I'm ready to—" "To what?" "To confront what you represent in my life. The catalyst of a change I hadn't foreseen, that I hadn't chosen. Would you have chosen it if you had known what awaited you?" The question was gentle, without accusation. Claire reflected, surprised to find that the answer wasn't as obvious as she would have believed a few months earlier. "I don't know," she finally admitted. "These past months have been difficult, but also revealing. I feel closer to myself than I have been in years." Karim nodded, understanding. Change is rarely comfortable, but sometimes it's necessary. Their gazes met, and Claire felt that strange connection that had established itself from their first encounter, that mutual recognition of two souls in transition. "The hour is almost up," she noted, glancing at her watch. "Then I'll respect our agreement." Karim stood, leaving on the table a card with the address and date of the opening. "If you come, I'll be happy to see you. If you don't come, I'll understand." He was about to leave, then reconsidered. "One last thing. Regardless of what happened, or what you decide now, know that our meeting in Los Angeles counts among the most authentic moments of my recent life, and I don't regret a single second of having known you, Claire Reynolds." With these words he walked away, leaving her alone with the card between her fingers, and a heart inexplicably lighter than it had been in a long time. The days following the encounter with Karim were marked by a creative agitation that Claire hadn't felt since her beginnings in the art world. The idea was born almost by accident, during one of those evenings with the informal group of art lovers she now frequented. They were discussing the inaccessibility of certain exhibitions, not physically but emotionally and intellectually, when Julia, a retired high school teacher, had sighed, "If only there were exhibitions that spoke directly to us, ordinary people, not with pretentious concepts but with stories that resonate with our lives." This comment had triggered something in Claire. That night, unable to sleep, she had begun to sketch a concept for an exhibition radically different from anything she had done before. Not an exhibition designed to impress critics or inscribe itself in art history, but one that would speak directly to people's hearts. An exhibition on moments of transition in ordinary life, those instants when everything shifts, when one becomes someone else. The irony didn't escape her. It was exactly the theme that Karim explored in his photographic work. But where he captured these moments through his lens, she imagined a multidisciplinary exploration: painting, sculpture, installation, video, and of course, photography. And what if, instead of starting with established artists to build a narrative, she started with the narrative to find artists, known or not, who would embody it? For a week she worked tirelessly on this concept, forgetting to eat, barely sleeping. Her apartment transformed into an organized chaos of notes, layout sketches, lists of potential artists. What was initially just a vague idea took shape, gaining substance and ambition. She had provisionally titled it Turning Points, a name that summarized both the content and her own recent experience. But a project of this magnitude required resources, a venue, financing, and her name, once a pass in the art world, was now tainted by the controversy of her departure. One morning, as she contemplated the difficulties ahead, her phone rang. An unknown number. "Claire Reynolds?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "Yes, speaking." "My name is Anna Foster. I'm the new director of the factory." Claire sat up straighter. The factory was a contemporary art center installed in a former textile factory in Brooklyn, an emerging venue that was beginning to get noticed for its bold programming. "Pleased to meet you," she responded cautiously. "What can I do for you?" "I'd like to meet with you to discuss a possible collaboration." Surprise left Claire momentarily speechless. "A collaboration? Now, after the scandal?" "I understand your astonishment," continued Anna, correctly interpreting her silence. "But I'm not interested in rumors, I'm interested in work, and yours has always impressed me." They agreed to meet the next day. Claire hung up, perplexed but intrigued. How had this woman found her? And why now? The factory was exactly as its name suggested, a vast converted industrial building with its red brick walls and high windows. Anna Foster awaited her at the entrance, a woman in her 50s with short salt and pepper hair and a lively gaze. "Thank you for coming," she said, shaking Claire's hand. "Follow me, I'll show you around." For nearly an hour, they toured the different spaces of the factory, vast, luminous exhibition halls, studios for artists in residence, a cultural mediation space where children from a nearby school were participating in a workshop. "Our philosophy is simple," explained Anna as they settled in her office for coffee. "Art must be accessible without being simplistic, provocative without being elitist. We want to create a bridge between artists and an audience that doesn't always feel welcome in traditional institutions." Claire nodded, increasingly intrigued by this approach that resonated with her recent reflections. "Why did you contact me?" she finally asked. "My reputation isn't exactly at its peak these days." Anna smiled. "That's precisely what interests me. Before your explosive departure, you were known for your impeccable but conventional approach. Now you're at a crossroads, free to reinvent your vision." She leaned forward. "And then there was that article in Contemporary Art. Karim Al-Fayez captured something that few people saw, that tension in you, that desire for change." At the mention of Karim, Claire felt her heart quicken. "You know Karim. We hosted his first exhibition at the factory 3 years ago, before he became known." Anna was observing her attentively. "It was he who suggested your name, in fact." The revelation hit Claire like a wave. Karim had spoken about her to Anna. When? Why? "I'm not looking for professional charity," she said, suddenly defensive. "And I don't offer any," Anna calmly replied. "The factory doesn't have the means to afford favors. What I propose is a carte blanche for our next season. Her space, a modest but real budget and total freedom." The proposal was as tempting as it was intimidating. Carte blanche. No directives, no preconceived expectations. Just her vision, whatever it might be. Claire hesitated, then decided to take the plunge. "I have a project in mind, something very different from what I've done so far." Anna's eyes lit up. "I'm listening." For the next half hour, Claire outlined her concept of turning points, progressively animating as she shared this vision that had been taking shape within her for weeks. She spoke of the idea of exploring moments of transition through different artistic practices, of giving voice to emerging artists alongside more established names, of creating an exhibition that would touch people on an emotional rather than intellectual level. When she had finished, a silence settled. Anna was looking at her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "That's exactly what the factory needs," the director finally said. "And I think it's exactly what you need too." They spent the following hour discussing logistics, schedules, budget. When Claire left the factory that day, she had not only a new project but also a new professional direction. Not a return to what she was before, but a step towards something different, more authentic. On the subway that took her back to Manhattan, she took out her phone and stared for several minutes at Karim's number, which she hadn't deleted despite her anger. Finally, she typed a simple message. "Thank you for the factory. I've accepted their proposal." "See." The response came almost immediately. "You don't need to thank me. You deserve this opportunity. I knew Anna would see what I saw." K. Claire put away her phone, a smile on her lips despite herself. For the first time in a long time, she felt that she was moving in the right direction, even if the final destination remained uncertain. That evening, returning home, she took out the card for Karim's opening that he had left during their last encounter. The exhibition opened in 3 days. After a moment of hesitation, she placed it prominently on her refrigerator, like a silent promise made to herself. The Whitney Museum was buzzing with activity. For the opening of the exhibition, Fragments, a diverse crowd packed the rooms, art critics, photographers, enthusiasts, all drawn by Karim Al-Fayez's growing reputation. Claire stood slightly apart, observing the scene with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. She had hesitated until the last moment before coming, fearing both encountering former colleagues and reawakening complicated emotions tied to Karim. In the end, her professional and personal curiosity had prevailed. Dressed in a simple black dress and white blazer, she tried to blend into the crowd, hoping to observe the exhibition before being noticed. The photographs were arranged differently than in Los Angeles, more spaced out, as if to give more weight to each individual story. New images had been added, and Claire studied them attentively, noting the subtle evolution in Karim's approach. "I wondered if you would come." She turned to find Karim a few steps away, elegant in a dark suit, a vintage camera around his neck, probably more an accessory than a working tool tonight. "I wondered too," she admitted with a small smile. They looked at each other for a moment, the atmosphere charged with unspoken words. Then Karim gestured toward the exhibition. "What do you think? In a professional way, I mean." Claire appreciated this approach, returning to the familiar ground of art before addressing more personal subjects. "It's stronger than in Los Angeles, more coherent. You've refined your narrative." She indicated a series of new photos. "These additions create an interesting contrast. Chosen moments of transition versus forced turning points." Karim nodded, visibly satisfied with her analysis. "That's exactly what I was trying to capture. The distinction between choosing to change and being forced to change." A comfortable silence settled between them as they contemplated together a photograph of a young man in a wheelchair on an athletics track, his face both determined and transformed by effort. "I have a new photo to show you," Karim suddenly said. "It's not in the main exhibition. Come." Intrigued, Claire followed him to a small adjacent room, separated from the rest by a black curtain. Inside, a single photograph occupied the central wall, illuminated by a discreet projector. Claire stopped, stunned. The photo showed her, seated on that bench in Central Park, where Karim had found her again. Her profile stood out against the golden background of autumn trees, and her expression, pensive but serene, perfectly captured that moment in her life, a moment of transition, of reconstruction. "When did you take this?" she murmured. "Just before approaching you. You were so absorbed in your thoughts that you didn't notice me." "You had no right," she protested weakly, but without real conviction. "I know. That's why it's not in the main exhibition. It's here in this private space, and it will stay only if you accept it." Claire approached the photo, studying the details, the soft autumn light on her face, the golden leaves swirling around her. Karim had captured something that she herself was just beginning to recognize, a form of peace amidst uncertainty, a quiet strength born of trial. "It's titled Rebirth," Karim gently explained, keeping a respectful distance. "Because that's what I saw in you that day. Not a defeat, but a birth." Claire felt unexpected tears sting her eyes. These last months had been so difficult, so disorienting, and yet, through Karim's lens, she could see something she hadn't fully recognized, her own resilience, her capacity to reinvent herself. "You can keep it," she finally said, "in the exhibition." Karim looked at her, surprised. "Are you sure?" "Yes. It's part of the story you're telling, and it's my story too. I no longer want to hide it." A moment passed between them, charged with mutual understanding. Then Karim took a step toward her, reducing the distance but stopping just before touching her. "There's something else I need to tell you, something I should have told you in Los Angeles." Claire watched him attentively, feeling that what would follow would change something between them. "I didn't invite you to my exhibition by chance. I had been observing you for a while. Your work, your way of talking about art. I saw in you what I had seen in myself a few years earlier. Someone immensely talented but trapped in a system, in expectations, perhaps even in their own success." He paused, searching for words. "I wanted to provoke you, push you to question your path, not to harm you, but because I sensed that you were ready for a change, even if you didn't know it yet." The revelation should have made Claire angry. This man had deliberately disturbed her well-ordered life, pushed her, even indirectly, toward a major professional crisis. But strangely, she felt no anger, rather a form of recognition mixed with a more complex feeling that she wasn't yet ready to name. "You took an enormous risk," she finally said. "It could have gone very badly." "I know." He held her gaze, not seeking to justify himself. "But sometimes, the greatest changes can only come from a disturbance. Like a forest fire that, despite its violence, allows for regeneration." They were interrupted by the Whitney's director, who poked his head through the curtain. "Karim, the journalists would like a few words with you." Karim nodded, then turned to Claire. I have to go, but I'd like to continue this conversation. Perhaps after. She hesitated, then smiled. Perhaps. I'll stay to see the whole exhibition. As he walked away, Claire remained a moment in the small room, alone with this image of herself, this woman in transition, in rebirth. She realized now that chance had never really guided her encounter with Karim. He had chosen her in a way, had seen in her a potential that she herself hadn't recognized. It should have made her uncomfortable. Instead, she felt strangely seen, understood in a way that few people had managed to do. Returning to the main room, she noticed a small group of former colleagues who were looking at her and whispering. Previously, this situation would have mortified her. Today, she greeted them with a polite but detached nod, continuing her way through the exhibition without letting herself be disturbed. She was no longer the person they had known, the one who defined herself through professional approval, who feared judgment, who followed a path traced by others. The woman in the photo, her new incarnation, was tracing her own path. The weeks following the opening passed in a creative whirlwind. Claire had thrown herself body and soul into the preparation of turning points, working closely with Anna and the factory team. The project had evolved, enriching itself with new dimensions. Instead of limiting herself to a traditional exhibition, she had decided to include an important participatory component, inviting visitors to share their own moments of transition through different mediums, texts, drawings, audio recordings. These anonymous testimonies would be progressively integrated into the exhibition, transforming it into a living organism that would evolve throughout its duration. Karim and she had met several times since the opening, first under professional pretext. She had invited him to participate in turning points with a specific series, then in a more personal way. Dinners, walks through New York, long conversations that sometimes continued until dawn. Their relationship evolved slowly, cautiously, each respecting the other's wounds and complexities. It wasn't a conventional romance, rather the meeting of two souls in reconstruction, who found in the other an echo of their own journey. One December evening, as they walked along the High Line, Karim asked her the question he seemed to have been holding back for a long time. "Do you regret what happened? The way things turned out after Los Angeles?" Claire contemplated the dark water of the Hudson where the city lights were reflected. The question deserved an honest answer. "I regret the way it happened," she finally said. "The public humiliation, the assumptions, the feeling of injustice. But the result—" She turned to him. "No, I don't regret that. As strange as it may seem, I feel more authentic now than I have in years." Karim nodded, understanding. "Freedom sometimes comes from the most unexpected places, even from a fall. Especially from a fall," she corrected with a small smile. "One never learns to walk again as well as when one has first fallen." They stopped on a section of the elevated park, contemplating the city illuminated for the year-end holidays. New York seemed different to her eyes now. No longer a professional battlefield, but a space of possibilities, of rediscovered beauty. "I've received an offer," Karim suddenly announced. "A book project and traveling exhibition on environmental transitions in isolated communities. It would start in spring for about a year." Claire's heart tightened. A year. A separation while their relationship was just beginning to take shape. "It's an incredible opportunity," she nevertheless said, sincere despite the tinge of sadness. "I haven't accepted it yet," he specified, his eyes seeking hers in the semi-darkness. "I wanted to talk to you first." The significance of these words touched her deeply. Karim, accustomed to a nomadic life, guided only by his projects and intuitions, was taking her presence into account in his decision. "You should accept it," she said softly. "What you do is important. These stories you capture, these moments you preserve, they matter." He was watching her attentively, searching beyond words. "And us?" The question floated between them, charged with uncertainties and possibilities. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "I only know that I don't want to be the reason you give up something you're passionate about, just as I don't think you would want me to give up my project to follow you." Karim smiled, a mixture of tenderness and admiration in his gaze. "You've changed. The Claire I met in the Hamptons might have wanted certainties, a precise plan. That Claire was terrified of uncertainty," she admitted. "The new one, is learning to embrace it. He took her hand, a simple gesture but charged with intimacy. And what if we did this? Fully live our respective projects, stay connected as we can, and see where life leads us, without rigid expectations, but also without closing the door to what might be. The proposal was both frightening and liberating, a relationship that wouldn't be defined by the usual conventions, but by a deeper mutual understanding, by a respect for their individual paths. "I'd like that," she said simply. That night, for the first time, she invited him to her home. They made love with a tenderness mixed with passion, like two people who know that time together is precious, but who refuse to live it in urgency or fear. In the early morning, lying against him in the nascent light, Claire realized something important. She was no longer afraid of the uncertain future. Whether Karim and she built something lasting, or their paths eventually diverged, she knew now that she could face whatever came. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured, gently caressing her hair. "I'm thinking that turning points aren't always dramatic moments," she replied. "Sometimes it's just an ordinary morning when you wake up and realize you're no longer the same person as before." Karim smiled against her skin. "That's exactly it. That's why I photograph them, to capture that precise instant when change becomes visible, even if it's been brewing for a long time." They remained like this for a moment, savoring this rare connection, this mutual understanding that surpassed words. Later in the day, as they worked side by side, she on the final preparations for her exhibition, he on the selection of photos for his book, Claire was struck by the strangeness of their encounter. How an initial confrontation could have led to such complicity, how a professional upheaval had opened the way to a personal renaissance. "What would you say to collaborating on a project one day?" she suddenly proposed. "Something that would combine your eye for moments of transition and my curatorial vision, maybe after your return." Karim looked up from his computer, a smile illuminating his face. "I'd like that very much. A fusion of our worlds, a convergence of our paths," she specified. At that precise moment, Claire knew with surprising clarity that, whatever happened between them, Karim would remain a transformative figure in her life, the one who, through his disruptive but necessary presence, had helped her rediscover an authenticity she had almost lost. And perhaps that was enough. Perhaps certain people entered our lives not to stay forever, but to help us become who we were meant to be. 6 months later, the factory's central courtyard was buzzing with activity. The official opening of Turning Points was attracting a diverse crowd, from art opening regulars to neighborhood residents, simple curious souls drawn by the media buzz that now surrounded the exhibition. Standing apart, Claire observed with a mixture of pride and wonder this realization that had taken shape against all odds. The exhibition had exceeded her initial expectations, evolving into something more organic, more alive than she could have imagined. The selected works, paintings, sculptures, video installations, photographs, dialogued with each other, telling a universal story of transformation. But the beating heart of the exhibition resided in the central space, where visitors' testimonies accumulated day by day, creating a collective tapestry of human experiences. "It's magnificent, Claire. Truly magnificent." Sophia stood beside her, amazed. Her cousin had made the journey from Boston specially for the opening, and her support meant more to Claire than all the praise from art critics. "Thank you for coming," replied Claire, squeezing her hand affectionately. "I couldn't have done all this without our conversation that day." Sophia smiled. "You would have done it. Perhaps differently, perhaps later. But you would have found your way." Claire scanned the space, vibrant with energy. Among the visitors, she recognized a few faces from the New York art world, some who had snubbed her after her fall, others who had never ceased to believe in her. But curiously, their presence or approval no longer seemed as crucial as before. What mattered were those moments when she saw a visitor stop, truly touched by a work or a testimony, establishing that authentic connection that had always been her profound motivation before career considerations took precedence. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from Karim accompanied by a photo, him standing in front of a solar panel in a remote village in Iceland, smiling despite the rain soaking his face. "Congratulations for today. I'm with you in thought. Capture me a piece of this day. Kay." Claire smiled, touched by this distance presence. Their relationship had continued to evolve over these past months, defying conventional categories. Video calls late at night, messages shared across time zones, sporadic but intense connections, when he returned briefly to New York between two destinations. It wasn't an easy relationship, not one of those that romantic novels celebrate. But it corresponded perfectly to what they had become, two individuals engaged in their own paths of transformation, who found in the other both an anchor and a freedom. Ms. Reynolds? Claire turned to discover Ellen White, the former president of the Foundation's board of directors, the very one who had orchestrated her forced departure. Ms. White, what a surprise. Claire maintained a polite but distant tone. The woman, still as elegant and intimidating, seemed unusually hesitant. I wanted to see for myself. Your exhibition is much talked about. In a good way, I hope. Claire couldn't help a touch of irony. In a very good way. Ellen made a gesture toward the central space. It's different, more direct, more human than what we did at the Foundation. The we didn't escape Claire, as if their former collaboration hadn't been brutally interrupted. That was the intention, she replied simply. Ellen hesitated, then added, The board of directors is meeting next week. We'll be discussing the future artistic direction of the Foundation. If you're interested. Claire understood the implicit offer, a possible return, a rehabilitation. A year ago, she would have seized this opportunity without hesitation, seeing it as an ultimate validation, a revenge for the humiliations suffered. Today, she felt mostly a gentle indifference. Thank you, Ellen, but I'm fully committed here with the factory. We already have projects for the next 2 years. Surprise crossed the other woman's face. Clearly, she hadn't expected a refusal. I understand, she finally said. It's admirable. After her departure, Sophia returned to Claire, a mischievous smile on her lips. Was that her? The dragon lady who got you fired? Claire nodded, amused by the description. And she offered you to come back, guessed Sophia. More or less. And you refused? Sophia seemed impressed. The old Claire would have jumped at the chance. The old Claire no longer exists, she replied simply. Or rather, she has transformed into something more true. Sophia observed her with tenderness. You're happy, aren't you? Truly happy. The question made Claire reflect. Was she happy? Her life no longer had the stability or prestige of before. Her relationship with Karim defied conventions. Her professional future remained uncertain beyond current projects, and her reputation in the art world remained ambivalent, some seeing her as a visionary, others as an eccentric who had ruined a promising career. And yet, yes, she replied with quiet certainty. I'm happy. Not because everything is perfect or because I know exactly where I'm going, but because, for the first time in a long time, I'm aligned with myself. I'm no longer playing a role. She took out her phone and snapped a photo of the exhibition's central space, capturing the vibrant energy emanating from it. She sent it to Karim with a simple message. A piece of this day, as requested. I'm saving you a place in all my turning points to come. See. Night was gently falling on New York when the last visitors left the factory. Claire remained alone in the exhibition space, savoring the silence after the day's effervescence. She wandered slowly among the works, stopping before the series that Karim had contributed. Photographs taken specifically for turning points, showing people at existential crossroads, their faces capturing that precise instant between what was and what might be. The last image of the series showed her, on that bench in Central Park, the image that had been exhibited at the Whitney. But Karim had added a second photo, taken the same day but a few moments later. In this one, Claire had turned her head, looking directly at the lens, a beginning of a smile on her lips, as if she had sensed his presence and welcomed it into her space. Under this diptych, Karim had placed a simple caption, "The echo of possibilities." Claire gently touched the image, moved by the rightness of this expression. It was exactly what she felt now, not a rigid certainty about what the future held, but a confident openness to the possibilities it contained. Tomorrow she would return here to welcome new visitors. In 3 weeks, Karim would spend a few days in New York before departing for his next destination. Perhaps one day their paths would converge more permanently, or perhaps they would continue this distance dance, each nurturing the other's transformation while pursuing their own way. What mattered was this newly discovered freedom, the freedom not to know exactly, not to control every aspect, to let life unfold with its uncertainties and surprises. Leaving the factory that night, Claire Reynolds carried within her a peace she had never known before. This exhibition, born from a fall that could have destroyed her, marked not the conclusion of a journey of rebirth, but rather its true beginning. For the most beautiful turning points she understood now were not endings, but openings toward infinite possibilities, echoes that resonated well beyond the present moment, transforming not only the one who experienced them, but all those who came into contact with their expansive wave.